Hey, fellow patriots, I'm Bree.
And I'm Blaze. Some call me Pa. It has been said that we have 4 boxes to keep ourselves free. These are the soapbox, the ballot box, the jury box, and the ammo box.
And we are the 4th box. We are here to arm you with enough information, resources, and skills to take back your freedom, increase your self-sufficiency, and inspire you to join in the fight against tyranny.
Thomas Jefferson said, "Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty." Thank you for joining us and for joining in this fight.
Welcome back to the 4th box. Okay, welcome back to the 4th Box podcast. It is our 102nd episode. It is almost the end of the year, only a couple episodes to get us there. But outside of all the usual drama and theatrics and chaos going on in the political world, life is good for me. So welcome back, everybody. Hope the same for you. How's it going, Pops?
All is well. All is well, and we are, we're inching toward Christmas. Actually, it feels like we're speeding toward Christmas. And we are in the 3rd week of Advent, for those of you familiar with that. And so we are not going to allow the circumstances of the world around us to suppress our joy, which is what we should be, basing our lives on as we think about the birth of our Savior coming. We're going to be celebrating here in about a week, actually, So that's coming up quick. So we do want to send a shout out to everybody that's joining us from around the country. Welcome back to the 4th Box podcast, coming to you once again from our virtual Buckman Tavern. And I have two full toasts tonight, as I have been doing quite often, actually, because I get one jotted down and then I find something else I'd like to mention. So first of all, tonight, I am offering a toast, and I am having a lovely Yingling from right here in good old Pennsylvania, America's oldest brewery, Black and Tan. It's a lovely beer for the season. And I'm sending a toast out to Tim Burchett, I think is how you say his name, and all of the other congresspeople and or senators that stood opposed to the signing of the National Defense Appropriations Act. And you might have heard that the Senate went to cloture, which means they're going to bring it to the full floor for a vote. And I just wanted to say to those folks that stood in opposition, it is absolutely beyond ludicrous that we're signing a bill 3,000 pages long, $900 billion, and none of those people read it. They did not read it.
Yeah.
So those that stand opposed, I offer my glass to you. Secondarily, for somebody who I think really exemplifies what we here at the 4th Box stand for, our recent recipient of the Heisman Trophy, young man's name is Fernando Mendoza. And here's a little piece that I found about his acceptance of the Heisman Trophy. Mendoza, who rose from near obscurity as the season began and earned his name as a top player, turned to his mother, one of his biggest supporters, as he accepted the award. "Mammy, this is your trophy as much as mine," Mendoza said. "You've always been my biggest fan. You're my light. You're my why. You're my biggest supporter. Your sacrifices, courage, and love have been my first playbook, and the playbook I will carry by my side through my entire life." He continued saying, "You taught me that toughness doesn't need to be loud. It can be quiet and strong. It's choosing hope. It's believing in yourself when the world doesn't give you much reason to. Together, you and I are rewriting what people think is possible. I love you." And that was from the recipient of the Heisman Trophy this past weekend. I thought that was a wonderful piece to his mother. exemplifying what we stand for here: God, family, country. And this coming from a person who is obviously going on to bigger things, and I hope he takes this humility and this view on his success and his life with him, where he will have a much bigger platform to proclaim those very things. So a big cheers goes out to that young man. I thought that was just great.
Yeah, cheers.
Okay.
Couple toasts. Was that it for you?
That's it for the toast, yeah.
All right.
And then for the quote tonight, the secret of freedom lies in educating people, whereas the secret of tyranny is in keeping them ignorant. And that comes from Maximilien Robespierre. We've used some of his stuff before. And I think to take that right into a subject that I mentioned last week, and I was challenged on it. I love being challenged by some of the things we talk about, but we had mentioned in our conversation, I think a week or so ago, about the number of people who graduate from college and never go on to use their degree. And it's kind of like buying a very expensive car and never using it, and it only depreciates from the moment you buy it. So, people ask questions about where do you come up with this stuff, and so I went back and did a little more research because I've been hearing that statistic for years, and from the National Survey of College Graduates, they say only 46% of surveyed college graduates are employed in their field of study, while 29% work in unrelated areas. So 29% are working, but in unrelated areas. But 46% are employed. So that means more than a majority are not employed in their direct area. And there were also studies done by other notable groups, including CBS, which is not one that usually lines up very well with what we discuss here, but CBS also. So that's a good place to go, but there's a lot of studies out there that show the same thing. Another remark I wanted to go back on, we stood in solidarity with Marjorie Taylor Greene back a few weeks ago when she announced that she was going to be departing the House of Representatives. But since then, I have really become disappointed in the lowbrow mudslinging that's gone on. And I really wish she would have kept herself out of that. It seems like her and Trump are throwing barbs back and forth. And I think at some point we expect our leaders and those that are aspiring to be or those that are in office to elevate themselves above this, what I call lowbrow mudslinging, name calling. There's no benefit to it. And unfortunately, I think Margie's got caught up in that a little bit. I really wish she'd step back away from that and take some higher ground. And then lastly, I think a lot of these things, as we've talked many times, such as the Candace Owens, Erica Kirk, the big gathering today, 4.5 hours, the two had met. And I'm thankful that they did, because I really think the same thing there. I think somebody needs to kind of calm the waters a little bit. Let's try to get to the bottom of these issues instead of seeing who can get the biggest platform. And secondarily, I think these things might be being either promulgated or pushed forward by, once again, the deep state, the CIA. These are distractions. These are things that are being put in the public's face to keep us from focusing on other things, such as the $900 billion going to the National Defense Appropriations Act, the marching closer and closer to the complete collapse over in Europe under the weight of the jihadi terrorists that are being welcomed into these countries by their own government, the marching toward a World War III with the Ukraine thing, and we're still funneling money through this NDA into that. So I just wanted to mention those couple of things, and I really think some of them are being fanned into life by those that would keep us distracted.
Yeah, I think that's always true. To go back to the kind of correction that you made, not a correction so much, but you just brought a statistic up on a subject that you had talked about a couple weeks ago. 46 or 49%, is that
46%?
46.
Yeah.
My speculation is it's probably less than that in total. It's 46% of surveyed adults
Yeah.
Surveyed collegiate graduates. I would suspect that there aren't a lot of people taking that survey that, put themselves hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt and are now sitting miserable at the cash register at the CVS. I don't think they're like wasting their time on a survey from the government, right? So obviously this is an assumption, but my assumption leads me to believe that 46% is optimistic at best.
Yeah, I would agree.
And not to mention that most of these degrees are, I shouldn't say most, right? Because then somebody's going to say, well, where do you get that statistic? What I'm saying is that many degrees that still exist are not they're simply not useful. I mean, we kind of talked about that in that last episode too, but if you're unsure about that, pull up any major university and go through the list of majors, and you will be alarmed at how many of these things are things that don't make sense and don't have a place in today's society and are simply not in use. And it's great for people who want to learn about these things, like I mentioned in that episode, on the side as a hobby. But you can do it elsewhere. You can do it at the local library. You don't have to buy into this narrative that you have to have a degree in anything, just anything at all, to succeed in life. So still glad that you shared that statistic so people recognize that it is a real thing, not just something we're making up. As far as the Marjorie Taylor Greene thing, this is a lot of what I wanted to get into tonight. We have all of these ongoing battles of people on the right, within the right. Like, okay, yeah, the right versus left has gotten pretty heated over the last 5 years, 10 years. We can all agree it's gotten very bad. Everyone's pushed all the way to one side or the other. People's minds are so set in their ways. They're not willing to look across the party line. That's true. But within the last 6 months, look at the division just on the right side. Red versus red, right versus right. There's so much division, and I think, to your point, it is being maybe not orchestrated all the way by someone or some group on the inside, but the flames that already exist are being fanned by those groups. And sure, you have people in the Marjorie Taylor Greene camp and you have people in the Trump camp, and you're like, I'm all the way pro this and screw you if you're that. But we also have a lot of those other battles going on. You brought up Erica Kirk and Candace Owens. This is a big one, and it's important. And I'm going to go into it a little deeper because, yes, I agree they needed to sit down and have a conversation in person. Do I think anything productive came out of it? Not really. If anything happened in there at all that was like remotely real, it was probably two women saying, we're both making a ton of money off this, let's keep it up. I don't think there was probably a lot of resolution other than that. What I will say is that from an outside perspective, as someone on the outside looking in who doesn't know either of these people and what their real motives are, it appears to me that one of their motives is disingenuous, Erica Kirk, and the other is actually just asking questions. Like, I don't know what their motive is, but they're asking questions, whereas the other one is saying, hey, anybody asking questions, shut up. And I'm always going to be on the side of the person asking questions, even if that person is total disagreements with me and what I believe and what I stand for. If one person is saying, I would like to find the truth, I don't know what the truth is, I think I'm going to go and look for it. And the other person is saying, I don't want to know, I don't want anybody to know. I'm much more inclined to listen to the questions being asked and go through that process of finding what the answers are. Because I think we can all agree that while the truth remains always true and objective, there is so much outside noise muddling you and I and anyone else from knowing what the truth is. And if we're not allowing ourselves to ask questions, then we've completely lost our ability to think for ourselves. All these other things that are important, free speech, everything is out the window if we can't simply ask questions. And with something so important, so impactful as Charlie Kirk's assassination, I don't care who's asking questions. I don't care if you're the most hardcore left-leaning liberal I've ever heard about. If you're asking questions, I'm going to be curious what you find when you start digging. And that's what we should be doing. That's to me the important thing there. But I also recognize that it doesn't really matter what either of their motives are. What the outcome is more division. And it's people on the right. There are so many people who, going back just a couple months, as we're starting to see things shift, after Trump takes the presidency in the beginning of the year, it's starting to feel like, we have this kind of awakening happening. I'm starting to see a lot of people come together on ideas and want to see the changes through. Maybe not by the government, right? But they want it to happen one way or the other. They want the people to be informed and involved. Now these very same people are splitting. I'm pro Erica, I'm pro Candace. For this reason or that reason or the other, it doesn't really matter what the reasoning is. What matters is that the split is there, and it's causing so much tension between people who are supposed to be fighting for the same thing. We're supposed to be pissed off about the same stuff. And it's so muddled down by these fights that, while they remain important in some capacity, it's not our fight. And we can't let it become a personal social battle between people that are supposed to be on our side, who we're looking to stand with and beside if things get bad enough, which we kind of have been expecting them to.
Yeah, you bring up a really interesting point. There is a couple of pieces to this. Number one, you mentioned the monetary aspect, and I think everybody that has their nose in this game, Tucker Carlson, Ben Shapiro, or the whole laundry list, who generally align with the right. And I'm not a right or left guy. I'm a libertarian. I happen to believe in constitutional principles. But there is a monetary aspect to this, and the more noise they create, the more attention they get. Secondarily, I think, as we suggested early on talking about this, is there something continuing to fan the flames or even initiate these conflicts between these different factions? And I would suggest that the same people that promote the right-left conflict are creating the conflict within the right. Mm-hmm. I would suspect they're either creating it or they are certainly fostering those flames and helping those get bigger. Because I suspect, as we talked last week, and I think you brought up yourself, Trump is not MAGA. MAGA is the movement. MAGA is the populist movement that says, hey, we know you guys have been screwing us. We don't know what all the dirt is, but we know that you are. You've lied to us for decades, if not centuries. You've stolen our wealth. You take $5.23 trillion this year. Every single one of those dollars comes from us, the working class, and we're tired of it. And I think as that movement on the right begins to coalesce around that notion, not so much a single figure, but the idea of big government being the threat, and big pharma and big media and all those things behind big government. I think they're saying, whoa, this group's getting pretty powerful, and maybe they're getting pretty close to uncovering some real truths here that's going to blow the lid off this thing. We need to get them fighting amongst themselves, and there is a benefit to them, that being the deep state taking care of the globalist cabal all through the elected public puppets that are down there. I think that by doing this, they create all this lack of energy. The wind goes out from behind the sails, and we're down here bickering between Candace's viewpoint and Erica's viewpoint, or Tucker's and Shapiro's, and on and on and on. If we stand on the Constitution is the rock. Mm-hmm. That is what we stand on. And another point, not to get too long-winded, I know you have some stuff you want to talk about, but the whole Tina Peters thing out there in Colorado, her being held in prison, and Trump pardoning her now the second time, and the state saying, well, too bad, it's a state charge, you cannot interfere. And my point that I made, and I sent it out to some of the radio people, and I don't know if anybody else was on this path, but the fourth Article 4 of the Constitution, the fourth clause says that the federal government is responsible in making sure that every state has a Republican form of government. Well, if you have obvious election improprieties, which we know have gone on all over the country, this stuff is coming out of the seams. If you know that this has gone on, then you cannot possibly be guaranteeing a Republican form of government if you can't even guarantee the integrity of the election. Therefore, it becomes a federal issue, and you need to go in and get her out of a prison where obviously she's being mistreated, held in solitary confinement, and all the rest of it for what is perceived or charged as a white-collar crime. That is mistreatment, that is cruel and unusual punishment, and the federal government has jurisdiction, and all they got to do is use the damn Constitution. If any of them knew it, maybe this circus wouldn't be going on.
Right. Yeah, that again, I mean, this ties into so much of the problem that is always going on, that, you know, there's just such a devolution from what we were supposed to be, and it continues to devolve, and I don't think that's going to stop until the bubble pops. I mean, eventually it's going to burst, right? And I think that it's not going to stop the downslide. Maybe as a country, maybe as people, we're doing okay. Maybe we're hanging in there, but our government is simply not functioning the way it was designed to function, and that cannot last forever. And all of these points are just evidence of that. And to go further into that, the other subject that I wanted to touch on when thinking about this division within the right is Dan Crenshaw and Shawn Ryan. And Dan Crenshaw is a sitting government official, and he is a prime example of just how much we have strayed from what we are supposed to be doing and how our governing officials are supposed to be behaving. And this whole battle between the two of them comes from Shawn mentioning how much insane amounts of money sitting congressmen have at their disposal to spend on frivolous things, when compared to the average American, they're probably making more as a salary, but is it enough to have the kind of money these people have to burn on just insane things like what Shawn was mentioning, that, you know, having a major musical act at your birthday party, like, you can't afford that on $150,000 a year, right? And obviously, this is a conversation that many people have had for years and years and years. I mean, I think there's finally some movement with Nancy Pelosi's actions in this way of insider trading. And maybe you won't even call it that, but it's just a fact that people in Congress have knowledge about things going on behind the scenes that the rest of us don't, and they're able to adjust their stocks accordingly. And, you know, there's not a lot of other explanations for that, or maybe there are, but that's the most obvious one. And the fact is, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that now we have another point of contention between two people on the right. Now, personally, Dan Crenshaw for me is another example of somebody who, when he went into office, I was 100% pro Dan Crenshaw. Loved him, thought he was great, thought he was just the kind of person that needed to be in Congress, thought he really stood for the American people coming in as a combat vet. You know, I thought he had a lot of good ideas. And like so many, spends a couple of years down there and he's just a swamp rat, the same as the rest of them. His ideas are disgusting. The things he says are so anti-American. It's very hard to wrap your mind around how that type of mental shift can happen, but he's a prime example of it. Nevertheless, you have people that are still very much pro Dan Crenshaw. And because of that, when something like this happens, you get more of that division between factions within the right. Now you have all these people that are team Shawn Ryan, you have all these people that are team Dan Crenshaw, and we're supposed to be on the same side, and we're splitting there too. So all of these seams are just splitting apart. We look further down the line, it's on and on and on. You know, you just shared with me the information about Patrick Byrne, and maybe you wanted to touch on that, so I'm sorry if I'm jumping ahead, but, you know, coming out and saying, oh, I'm an ex-CIA agent. This is a guy who, we saw speak on just how much collusion was going on with other countries and how much tampering was happening within our elections. So somebody who was very much in the group of people like Mike Lindell, same thing. Now we're going to get that split. Patrick Byrne, Mike Lindell. Where people fall, we're all on the same side here, and yet we're being pulled apart in these little battles, but we're forgetting the war.
Yeah, and I think that's all by design. And just to go back, I didn't gather up anything much more on the Patrick Byrne thing. It was such a disappointing thing to hear that when we touched on it last week. But to touch on the Dan Crenshaw thing, I feel the same way. I think a lot of us were really happy when he went in there as a freshman congressman, had a lot of good ideas, looked like he was going to stand on the Constitution. By the way, as a veteran, he is a combat veteran. I think he was a special operator. I don't know if he was a SEAL or Delta Force or what he was. I think a SEAL. But he took an oath. He took an oath, and he is no longer living up to it. So you can tell the forces that are existing down in Washington to take somebody who is that committed to his ideals, which really aligned with freedom-loving people in this country, and now to have completely washed them aside and be participating, as you suggest, with all these wonderful gifts that he's able to provide, his family and so forth on a salary that is not able to do that. So who has the hooks in him to provide these kind of benefits? And subsequently, he sold his soul on his vote. And this is what happens. We know we have sent a lot of good people down there over the years. And ultimately, if they're down there more than a term or two, this is what has happened to them. We have nobody left down there we can trust. If every single one of them took an oath to that Constitution and none of them live up to them, then they are all liars, and nothing that comes out of their mouth is worth believing. And this is what has happened with Crenshaw now. So, but to go back to your circle all the way back, I think the flames are being fanned to keep this division going. I think the right-left thing is also a part of it. But if the populist movement, the freedom-loving movement, the MAGA movement, with or without Trump, if that is becoming too powerful, too big of an entity, then the same forces that keep the Republican Democrats feuding with each other are going to be at work to keep anybody on that freedom-loving movement to be ripping each other apart as well.
100%. And it's not hard to do. It is not hard to distract us.
Yeah.
It's just our way. And that's unfortunate, but it's just the society that we've come up in where, again, how many times can we reiterate the instant gratification, the addiction to the cell phone, and the constant bombardment of information? It's so easy to distract the population. And if you are the one pulling the levers of those distractions, it is very easy to, in turn, control the direction in which those bodies are going. So, I mean, to me, it's just tough watching all this stuff. And I have inherent sides that I lean towards when I hear about these things, but I remind myself I am missing the big picture if I'm getting ultra focused on these little arguments between people, because our fight is real. Every fight that we've talked about that we as the American people have with the global forces, with our own government that we've talked about for the last, however many 101 episodes, all of those fights are still ongoing. We have not solved any of them, actually. So we cannot get caught up in this BS because we have a much bigger fight at hand. It is not Dan versus Shawn, Erica versus Candace. It's still us versus them. And it's easy to get caught up in the fight when it's red versus blue and right versus left. But I think people are forgetting that when it's in your own party, it's just as meaningful. So I wanted to go through all of that stuff tonight. I know you have some other stuff to get into, so let's do that. But I think it's just so important that people remember that these things are just more of the theater that we are constantly being force-fed.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And I think it's meant to distract those of us that try to pay attention. Let's say that a third to half of the country's checked out and they don't even want to be troubled by it. whether it's too big to consider or there's just no interest. What are you worried about that for? We can't do nothing. I don't know. I still have a hard time putting my finger on what it is that so many people just they don't know anything. They don't want to know anything. They're just plodding along, having somebody stealing their, a third of their paycheck or 25% of their paycheck or whatever their labors and spending it on whatever they want. But I just don't understand it. But let's say 30, 33, a third to a half of the people are in that boat. Then there's the other half or so that kind of want to pay attention in there. And no matter how much you try, you kind of align yourself with different voices out there, whether it's completely contained within one traditional party or not. You kind of align yourself with voices. And what I like to constantly try to bring up and remind myself and remind others, it is we, the freedom-loving people. I don't care what you call yourself. Right, left, gay, straight, religious sect, I don't care. If freedom is burning in your soul, freedom is in your heart, and you want to be able to live your life as you choose, honor the God of your choosing, do with your money what you will, live the life that you want up until the point that it's infringing on somebody else's right to live as they want. That is what we are supposed to have. And everything else is background noise, all these little skirmishes that they keep us distracted with, and therefore they keep us off the proper trail. The more time we spend on these sideshows, listening to drivel that comes off the television set and off of your cell phone, listening to this drivel instead of sticking to the principles of personal liberty. I don't care which side defends it most. I don't care no side defends it. I'm going to stand for that if I'm the last guy standing. And if we all took that approach and all recognized who was infringing on our right to live the life as we choose, we would know who the target is. Forget all the other noise. So that is the underlying thing for us, I think, on this podcast. We will continue to harp on what we are supposed to have. Remember, there wasn't even a Republican Party per se back when this country was founded. Back around the days of Abraham Lincoln, it kind of switched from the Whig Party and became what is now known as the Republican Party. But these lines have been blurred for decades. One decade, this party's cheering for this, the next decade, the other. This is what should tell everybody that this is just a sideshow. Keeping us enslaved by keeping us distracted is what all of their goal is down there, and we need to learn that lesson. But a couple other things to support that, I hope everybody had an opportunity to see. It's now coming out through FBI documents that are going to be presented in Congress that there was no evidence to justify, as if any of us really needed to hear this, the raids on Mar-a-Lago. Subsequently, another thing that's worth noting, and this is how you know we, the people, are not who they're concerned with. When evidence that was brought forward in the Comey case, who was involved with Russiagate and all these other things as the FBI director, has been ordered by a federal judge to be destroyed. And it was to be destroyed by 4 p.m. This past Monday. Now, I don't know at what point do we allow our judges to tell us that evidence in a pending case has to be destroyed. This is how you know the government, that being all three branches, the judiciary, the legislative body, and the executive, they are not here for we the people. They are there to protect themselves. And now they're ordering the destruction of evidence that might shed some light on the thievery that is Washington, D.C., the corruption, the filth, the garbage that's down there. And as soon as some of that might become evident, now judges are ordering that evidence to be destroyed. This is where we are living. Let me see what else. Oh, I had this kind of as a closing note, but I do know you got some things. If you happen to be a person who takes note of symbolism, events, I wanted to mention, I don't know if everybody's seen it yet, that a 78-foot high replica of the Statue of Liberty that is in a town in Brazil, I think it's called Guaiba or something like that in Brazil. The 78-foot high replica of the Statue of Liberty standing on a 30-foot pedestal was blown over today, I believe. I think it was today. Tuesday.
What was the cause of that? Just extreme weather?
Yeah, there was a significant weather event, and the Statue of Liberty was blown down. If you happen to be a person who takes any stock in symbolism, I would take a little stock in that, as the Statue of Liberty was toppled in Brazil. That was earlier this week.
Yeah, I should say.
Anyway, talking about the $5.23 trillion that the federal government's going to spend, I guess, this year. Just remember, every single one of those dollars, every single one, comes out of the pockets of the American working class, people that are working for a paycheck. That's where those dollars come from. And most of those dollars are being spent on things that we, the people that are funding them, would not approve of. This is how you know it's not a Republican, it's not a Democrat thing. This is bigger than all of them. They keep us feuding with these little squabbles off sideshows, but they are taking $5.3 trillion and they're spending it, and it's money that's been taken from you, and most of what it's being spent on, such as the continuation of the war in Ukraine, the continuation of DEI programs within the United States government and the United States military. All this stuff continues to go on, and most of the country simply does not agree with it. So do you think your voice is being heard by those that are there to represent you? It absolutely is not. If they're hearing it, they're certainly not reacting to it as if it makes any difference.
Right. Not to mention that this money, these trillions of dollars that they're taking out of our pockets, are it's money we don't have. We have discussed this on this show too. As a country, we are coming up on $1.5 trillion in credit card debt because people are paying for their means of survival with credit cards. That bubble eventually bursts too. That can't go on forever, and it won't. People are going to get hungry. People are going to get cold. Eventually, people can't afford to pay their bills. But guess who isn't going to stop coming and knocking at your door? The IRS. If that isn't enough to piss you off, what is? I mean, it can be that basic. If you start looking into it, it's like way worse. It's disgusting that these people are horrible to their core. But leave it that basic. Leave it from the simple fact alone that they're stealing your money. Shouldn't that be enough? How many episodes do we have to come on here and say this? But it goes on. It goes on and it goes on and it goes on because they really think in office they're so powerful there's nothing we can do. That's not true. We just haven't done it yet. It doesn't mean the change can't come.
Yep.
So, one thing I saw somebody share something about within the past week was that, and I've heard people kind of say this before, but it was just in my mind as we were going into this episode. It's easy to look around and think this is the worst that we've had it as a country. I mean, this is as bad as it's gotten in our history. When we look at everything going on, like big scale, pedophiles running our government, yeah, it's bad. It's like really, really bad. The worst, I would say. I would also say when we talk about these problems that we have, we consistently reference that this is a spiritual battle and there is real demonic work at play. This is actually not new. This is as old as time itself, in fact. So the problems are not new. What's good news about the fact that we are where we are today, the problems look bigger because we see more. This is the most awake we've been in human history because we have access to more information. People are waking up every single day and getting upset. And maybe they haven't yet figured out where they can find community. Maybe they haven't yet figured out exactly what it is they believe, but they know they don't trust the people that are governing their whole lives anymore. And I think that there are more of people who believe that than ever before in our country and in truth around the world. Maybe in some cases in other countries more than here, because the line has been crossed so much more and so much further in other countries already than our own. I think there are other countries who have had more of that kind of like revival starting. But I think it's here too. And I think that the threats are increasing, not just because they are. I think the threats are increasing because we're stronger. I think we're more awake, we're more educated, we're more informed on the evil that's at hand. And so the threats are increasing and the chokehold is tightening because you have to shut us up to stay in power. And we talk about some of these people like, you know, Marjorie Taylor Greene or Dan Crenshaw, who they go in there and it looks pretty good in the beginning. It looks like they're going to be the right person for the job. But we've also talked about with a guest on this show that in truth, it's probably always only going to be a psychopath that lands themselves in that position anyway. So it's actually not that surprising that things have gotten this bad because we've let ourselves be ruled by psychopaths for so long and by demons for so long. And until people start seeing that, there's not a lot we can do. But as I just said, I genuinely believe that more and more people are seeing it every day. And I think the tide is going to shift. It has to. Maybe it isn't in your lifetime. Maybe it's not in mine. But it's going to come.
Well, it will come, and history does display that. You know, at some point, just like we've talked about many, many times, the Wendell Tyler cycle, people are going to at some point recognize that they're living in bondage, and they're going to decide that they're no longer going to do it. And I think we're at the point now where some of these people are starting to recognize it. There are some that have recognized it for a long time, but now there's a larger percentage of people recognizing we're at the bottom of that cycle. We are living in bondage. We are working and spending our working days for the benefit of somebody who doesn't. That is bondage. You are living, you are working for the benefit of somebody who does not. You are the slave today. And as more and more people wake up to that, I think the attacks to try to break that momentum, such as we talked about earlier on in the show tonight, are going to become more prevalent. They're going to become louder. They're going to become more obnoxious, more in your face, try to keep us distracted and knock us back off of the course. But history will show that at some point there's enough people that recognized we're in bondage. Now we're going to stand together. We're going to stand in unison. We're going to, through great spiritual courage, we are going to win back that very independence that was won back 250 years ago. And, you know, we're coming up on Christmas Eve. What a remarkable, remarkable historic event. When you think about George Washington leading roughly 2,600 men across the partially frozen Delaware River in makeshift rafts, many of them without shoes, not adequately fed, been starving and hungry and freezing for weeks and months, and to surprise the Hessians that were here in support of the English over in New Jersey once they crossed the river. It was a turning point of the war, and we celebrate that very event, that picture of Washington in that boat as he leads those men across that river with big chunks of ice. Think about what was the level of commitment. And when we get to that point, it looked daunting. It looked overwhelming. It looked as if there was no possible way that this ragtag bunch of farmers and blacksmiths and merchants could do what they did, but they did. And that's what we have to go through. And we've said it for weeks and months and almost 2 years now. There's going to be a lot of ass ache. There's going to be a lot of pain that goes along with this. But people at some point will get tired of living in the conditions that our ancestors were living under 300 and 400 years ago when the first American Revolution began. And at some point, we here in this country are going to get tired of spending our toils for those who are stealing from us, and they're taking it from our children and our children's future. At some point, enough of us are going to say, I'm sorry. This game is over. I will die on this hill.
Yeah.
And when that day comes, it will be over because there's a hell of a lot more of us than there are of them. And all we got to do is recognize it. J6, you know, a bunch of us down there. Just think if there was 10 million people, this thing would have been turned around. And at some point, that is going to be what happens. And all of those sons and daughters who are in military uniform, they're sons and daughters of we the people. And they got to remember that. Their commitment is to protect the liberty that was purchased by the blood of our forefathers for we the people, not some puppet master oligarchs down there in Washington, D.C. And when that awakening occurs, this thing will be over.
Yeah. Yeah. So kind of a long tangent and one we've gone on many times before, but were there other points that you had that you wanted to make sure we got to tonight? I know you said you had some stuff. I want to make sure we don't skip over anything.
I think I got most of the points out there, and I know we took almost an hour, and I know you had some other things, and I'm certainly willing to get to those topics that you had wanting to discuss tonight.
Well, not a lot. I mean, we kind of got through the bulk of the things that were on my mind, but I did want to, because we're talking about all of this, division going on and remembering who the common enemy is, I wanted to talk about some of the things that were sort of readily available. And obviously, we've seen more shootings, not just in our own country, but in countries where, believe it or not, guns are banned already. Imagine that there could be such a thing in a country with very strict gun laws, but nevertheless, it happened. Hard to imagine how somebody who wanted to shoot other people could get their hands on a gun. But the point remains that the current world that we live in is so messed up and so bad and so sick and so twisted that before I have any feeling of sadness in my heart for what happened, I have the immediate response of starting to ask questions as to why and what is the narrative and what is the agenda and who does it serve. And that is so sad that is my immediate reaction, but I do not think that is a rare occurrence for most of us. I think that's something that happens frequently. We can already look at the shooting in Bondi Beach and see things that just simply do not add up. There literally was an actor there. There's literally photographic evidence of him having special effect makeup on. It's pretty hard to walk that back now. And so we see these types of things and we recognize that the manipulation on gun control continues on a global scale because we do have power in that. It's why it's in our Constitution. Going back to the very beginning, we want a rock to stand on. That's the rock. And it's in there and it's high up for a reason. And they're going to keep coming after it and keep coming after it and keep coming after it because it doesn't serve the global agenda and the global initiative to kill us all off and have whatever's left working as their slave population, which, as we've reminded you many times, I guess this episode is just sort of a reminder of things. That's the goal. So when we see these shootings happen, yes, it is sad. Yes, it's a terrible thing to have happen, but it gets used immediately to serve a motive. And we have to remember that is there. That is in the back of people's minds, always. Not only that, but we have the continued increased surveillance. And right now in our own country, when we talk about digital IDs and digital passports, we're not quite there yet. But now they're issuing this whole, biometric, iris scanning, all this stuff for people coming in from out of the country. So foreigners coming to visit America now have to go through all of these digital ID protocols, steps to get into the country, including releasing 5 years of their social media history. Mm-hmm. If they can do that to a foreigner, they can do that to you. And also, how do you think they're looking at their social media history? It's not with a person. They cannot go through that number of items, that amount of information quickly enough to let them into the country. 5 years worth of data for every single person coming in. It's AI, obviously. They're using technology to go through this social media history. So that means the social media history being judged by AI. The AI has the ability to determine what's okay and what's maybe extreme, what's maybe considered terrorism. That means the technology exists. That means it could be used on you tomorrow. Can't forget that. Can't forget who the enemy is here. Along with that, I wanted to bring up, the last thing I wanted to touch on is the flooding that's going on in the northwest part of the country that is, I mean, crickets. Nobody's talking about this. It's not in the media at all. The flooding is very serious. There is really, really bad stuff going on in parts of Oregon, Washington, and Montana. And again, I live in a world where I am so jaded by the madness that goes on every day. And I've seen so many of these theories be proven to be reality that my immediate instinct is always to go, well, why is that happening? And what is the motive? And who is behind it and who benefits? Pretty much no matter what happens, that's always what I'm asking myself. And then I immediately think, oh, that's so weird that there were weeks of this tool fog, it was called, in California. There was this aggressive fog, radiation fog, sweeping the whole part of the country. People were issued all sorts of air quality warnings to stay inside and stay out of the fog. And then all of a sudden, in the same part of the country, we have insane flooding, almost as if maybe, I don't know, it's just a theory in my own head, some sort of high capacity weather modification. I'm just thinking out loud, but again, I recognize who the enemy is, and when shit like this happens, I go, oh, that's really weird. And it doesn't add up, and things have not added up before, and the truth comes out, and it's never in our favor. It's never benefiting we the people. And then when we think about all of this area, all of parts of the parts of Oregon, parts of Washington, and parts of Montana that are flooding, it's good farmland. Sure makes great farming country. Oh, that reminds me of other conversations we've had on this show where they're really trying to kill the entire farming industry and our ability to feed ourselves. And again, am I speculating? Is this all a legend? Of course. But the fog was real, and the flooding is real, and nobody's talking about it. And I think about all these things, and I think about the rest of the conversation we had tonight, and I go, I remember who the real enemy is. Does everybody else? Please see who the enemy is here. Because to me, I look at these things, and it feels so obvious that it hurts.
Not only that, Bree, but to go all the way back and to maybe even just put it in a piece that might be a lot more palatable to a lot of people who don't want to go down that path yet. We talked about $5.23 trillion is going to be spent. $900 billion, $900 billion, almost $1 trillion in the National Defense Appropriation Act. That's your military spending, more than the rest of the world. It's going to be spent on these things so that they can fabricate more wars and kill more people and expend more weaponry and all the rest of it. How much of it's going to investigate what this fog was all about? How much of it is going into the flood recovery and controlling that and trying to take care of the people that were affected? How much of these dollars, just like the folks down there in the Carolinas, Tennessee Hills back a year ago, after those storm centered right up over the top of them in October a year ago, just like that, it was crickets. Nobody rushed in to take care of them. So when you think about the money that the government's spending, and it's going all over the world for all kinds of things that we don't agree with, and while there's people in this country being affected by things that may or may not have been man-made, we can get into that whole discussion another time. Either way, there's Americans being affected adversely, losing their homes, losing their farmland, losing the ability to generate their income. And what is going to happen with that? All this money we're throwing everywhere else, what's going to happen with those people? That should be pissing people off to no end. And the last thing I wanted to make a note about, since you got me, one more thing popped into mind. You might have noted that the FDA, I think it was the FDA, one of the national things related to medicine and so forth, has already made the announcement that now there was deaths caused by the COVID vaccine. The thing is starting to bubble over. This thing's going to come out. And I cannot help but put a personal aspect to this where you see these high rates of cancer, extremely fast moving cancers affecting children, affecting friends, affecting neighbors. It's all around us. And I was listening to a guy today. I think his last name was Kelly. I don't know. I may have listened to him before. And he said, I want to know who's going to go to jail for that. You know what? I'm not a death penalty guy. But sometimes I say, I want to know who's going to hang for this. Children were dying. Children are dying from vaccines. When the FDA makes an announcement that children died from the vaccine, and they say, oh, the number was small. I don't care if it was one. It's too many. And everybody knows it was way, way much bigger than that, 1,000 times bigger than that. And it's still going on. And it's still going to go on.
Mm-hmm.
These people aren't looking out for you guys. They're going to all pretend now they're going to, but why did they have to hide the data for 75 years? Why are all these pharmaceutical companies absolved from any liability? This stuff was known to going to be taking place. This country ought to be burning the walls down.
Yeah.
Every bit of wealth that all of them son of a bitches had stolen from us that are sitting in government and sitting in these high offices, whether elected or appointed, and they've been stealing from us. Every bit of that wealth should be returned to these families, and that's never going to come close to replacing what people lose when they lose a loved one. And a lot of this stuff, it's going to come out. A lot of this stuff was known to going to happen. That is exactly why they were absolved of liability. That is exactly why the studies and the data was going to be sequestered for 75 years. Everybody, every single person in this country that has their wealth stolen from them through their paycheck to fund this criminality should be ready to burn this place down.
Yeah. Because
we've been lied to, we've been stolen from, and we've been killed and watched friends and neighbors and family affected by what they've done to us in the water, in the medicine, what they call medicine and what they call vaccine. And they knew this crap was going to happen. And it's going to bubble over. And maybe that's when the bubble breaks. If enough of us stand, there don't have to be no conflict.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I felt like I had touched on everything that was in my mind, but I didn't. And that was one of the things, actually, was that, the FDA putting this black box warning now on the vaccines. Cool. That's awesome. That's great. It's not going to stop anybody, especially when I actually went to look up an article on it, and you wouldn't believe all the articles that I found that were in the midst of, in the same time frame of this information coming out about the deaths and about the black box warning. In the same time frame, there's articles coming out about how, this one I really loved. Statistically, it said taking the vaccine lessens a woman's chance for a premature pregnancy. And I said, oh yeah, that's 100% true. Because it lessens her chance of pregnancy. You dumbasses. That's where the statistic comes from. Obviously. And these articles that are praising the thing, that they're admitting murdered people, are coming out in the same frame of time. They're all coming out in the last few days. And I'm like, how is this possible? We have big pharma to fight, but we also have big media, because they're all doing the same thing. They're all committing the same crimes, and they look like two separate things, but they're not. They're all arms of the same beast, right? We know that. But the other thing that I wanted to say when you talk about this bubble bursting is that this episode is going to air on Thursday, the 18th. Friday, tomorrow, December 19th, is when, according to our government, who we know has never lied to us before, is when all of the remaining Epstein files will be released to the public.
Yeah.
One, I don't buy it.
No.
5 minutes ago, they didn't exist at all. So, okay. And two, I don't even really know. I guess I don't have a two, because I don't know if anything would even happen if they all did come out. I don't know if enough people would pay attention, but it could be the thing that sets people over the edge. It could. I don't know. I never know what will. I just assume it's coming all the time. And I think as much as we started this episode saying it's almost Christmas and we should have joy, I think we should also be mindful and prepared at all times, because we never know. This whole thing could pop at any moment, and we are well overdue.
Well, absolutely. You just wonder there's just awe in my mind at how gullible, uninterested, chicken shit we can be to continue to tolerate the lies, the abuse, the thievery, and the enslavement that we're living under. At some point, there's just going to be enough, and we're going to have to stand in unison, and then that day will be over on that day. Until then, I just watch in amazement that we still sit here and tolerate this. We sit here and tolerate it. Watching children suffer, having kids die, and now they admitted that they killed kids with this stuff, that they were ordering people to take, mind you. Let's not let time diminish what the conditions were on the ground during those days. Biden was going to issue executive orders that anybody that didn't take it should have been fired from their job, forcing people to take it. And now they're admitting that it killed people. That should be a trigger.
Yeah.
Anyway, we are going to close with joy in our heart, because we know when turmoil here on earth is over and we leave our earth suit, there is a place beyond this for us. So we continue to fight against what we know to be evil, the demonic forces that occupy this earth. We continue to fight about it. I am not bashful. I will not bow down. I will not kneel. I kneel in front of my Savior, who's coming a week from the night. Praise the Lord. We'll celebrate his birth. And other than that, we will continue with sword in hand and the armor and all that stuff, because we know we have a duty to proclaim the truth. And the truth is, there is evil all around us, and you have to call it out when you recognize it.
Yeah, amen to that. That's the best we can do here on earth, and that's what we're going to continue to do every week, come what may. So if I've got nothing else, if you've got nothing else, I'll let you close us out.
Okay, Bible verse tonight. Let us hold unswervingly to the hope we profess, for he who promised is faithful. Hebrews 10 and verse 23.
There you go. All right. Well, it's been a good one. Always is. We will be back next week. It will be Christmas Day, so not exactly sure what we're going to put together. Probably going to be something short and sweet, but we will do our best to keep that one joyful and in positive spirits, because it is a time of the year to be joyful and to count our blessings. So in the meantime, while you are reflecting on all of these things and hopefully finding the joy and the blessings in your own life, we'll be back next week at 6 p.m. Stay vigilant.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you so much for listening. We really do appreciate the support and truly love getting to share this message with anyone who wants or needs it. The best way for you to support the show is to subscribe, add a rating, and share with everyone you know. You can find us on Instagram, X, and at thefourthbox.com. We'll see you next Thursday at 6 p.m. Stay vigilant.